You are at a busy cafe, or maybe a crowded party. You glance across the room and notice a complete stranger has their eyes locked onto you. They don't smile, they don't wave, and they make no move to start a conversation. This creates a tension vacuum. Without a verbal anchor to ground the interaction, the brain struggles to categorize the encounter. You are left with a raw visual input that lacks any immediate context. To manage this uncertainty, the human nervous system relies on an evolutionary default, assuming the watcher is a threat. For early humans, a silent, unblinking stare from a stranger was a reliable indicator of a predator or a hostile rival. Even now, your brain often defaults to assuming you are being judged or assessed. The clinical reality suggests a specific mechanism. In many cases, a silent gaze is a physical symptom of cognitive overload. The person watching you is processing so much internal data that they cannot spare the mental resources to speak. Recognizing this biological bottleneck shifts your perspective. The perceived threat follows a mechanical, predictable pattern of human behavior. The first major trigger for this kind of cognitive overload is intense romantic attraction. When someone spots a highly attractive subject, their visual processing centers experience a spike in dopamine. The brain dedicates its primary resources to the immediate reward of looking at you. Because the brain is preoccupied with this visual processing, the pathway to the motor and speech planning centers often flickers and fails. The complex behavioral sequence required to walk over and initiate a greeting remains untriggered. Externally, this person appears captivated and physically locked in place. They are looking at you, but their ability to act on that visual input is momentarily offline. In this state, silence isn't a calculated move. It is the byproduct of a neurological system that has reached its temporary capacity for processing. We see a similar silent output at the opposite end of the emotional spectrum, paralyzing social anxiety. A dense social environment can trigger a cortisol-induced freeze response. The body locks up as the brain perceives a high-threat situation. Internally, their mind is racing through dozens of variables. They are overanalyzing their posture, their expression, and the eyes of everyone in the room to avoid making a social error. To handle this wave of internal data, the person enters a buffering state. They may zone out and stare in your direction, but their focus is entirely consumed by managing their own internal panic. The piercing quality of the stare exists in the mind of the receiver. For the sender, it is an involuntary act of psychological self-preservation. Since both attraction and anxiety result in silence, you can use specific physiological markers to identify the underlying cause. This matrix shows the indicators for attraction. Look for expanding pupils and a torso leaning slightly forward. Observe their eye movement. If you catch them looking, they will dart their eyes away, but they will return to look at you again seconds later. In the anxiety column, the markers change. The posture is characterized by a stiffened spine and a high blink rate. You may see them touch their neck to self-soothe. If you make eye contact, they will look down and avoid meeting your gaze again. When the bodies are removed, the tracking tells the story. The looping path back to your eyes indicates attraction. The single downward path away from your eyes indicates anxiety. These micro-behaviors bypass conscious control, providing a physical map to a stranger's internal state. Understanding these mechanics changes your role in the room. You move from being a self-conscious target to an analytical observer of body language. When you identify the looping gaze of attraction, you can navigate the space with internal confidence, knowing you have successfully captured someone's attention. When you recognize the rigid posture of anxiety, you can replace your defensive instincts with empathy. You can acknowledge that their silence is a response to their own environment, not a judgment of you. A silent stare indicates a specific threshold has been crossed. It is a sign that someone else's psychological bandwidth has reached its limit.